The question surrounding Can Yaman's possible appearance on El Hormiguero has suddenly become one of the most talked about topics among fans and entertainment insiders alike. What was expected to be a highly anticipated television moment has now turned into a source of uncertainty, raising a simple but powerful question: has Can Yaman's appearance really been cancelled, or is something else happening behind the scenes? The situation began quietly, without any official announcement or dramatic headline. Initially, viewers noticed small details that felt out of place. Promotional hints that were expected never appeared. Usual confirmations seemed delayed. For a show as organized and closely followed as El Hormiguero, even the smallest change can trigger curiosity. And in this case, the silence surrounding Can Yaman's name spoke louder than any statement could have. Fans, who were eagerly waiting to see him on the popular program, began to question what was going on. Social media filled with speculation, but not the kind driven by exaggeration. Instead, it was careful observation. People noticed the absence of clear confirmation, the lack of follow-up, and the sudden pause in communication. These details suggested that something had shifted at the last moment, creating uncertainty where excitement once stood. What makes this situation particularly intriguing is Can Yaman's current position in the public eye. His international presence has been steadily growing, and every appearance carries weight. An invitation to El Hormiguero is not just another interview, it represents visibility, timing, and strategy. This is why the possibility of a cancellation immediately raised questions. If the appearance was indeed planned, why would it suddenly be in doubt? As the discussion grew, two narratives began to form. One suggested that the appearance had been cancelled entirely, possibly due to scheduling conflicts or unexpected changes. The other hinted at something more complex: a postponement, a renegotiation, or a strategic decision made behind closed doors. What fueled both narratives was the same element: a lack of clarity. Neither Can Yaman nor the show had addressed the situation directly, leaving room for interpretation. This silence does not necessarily imply a problem. In the entertainment world, silence often signals ongoing discussions rather than final decisions. Still, for fans accustomed to quick updates, the waiting felt unusual. The phrase "what's really going on" became more than curiosity, it became the core of the conversation. Another factor adding to the intrigue is timing. With Can Yaman navigating important professional moments, every public appearance is carefully considered. A sudden change involving El Hormiguero would not be taken lightly. This suggests that if something has shifted, it likely carries strategic importance rather than being a simple oversight. As attention continues to build, one thing becomes clear: this situation is not being ignored, it is being watched closely. Fans are not looking for drama, but for understanding. They want to know whether the appearance is truly off the table or simply waiting for the right moment. At this stage, there are more questions than answers. And while no official confirmation has been made, the growing curiosity confirms one thing: whatever is happening with Can Yaman and El Hormiguero, it matters. The uncertainty itself has turned into a story, one that continues to evolve as everyone waits for the next development. As the uncertainty around Can Yaman's appearance on El Hormiguero continued, the conversation gradually shifted from speculation to interpretation. Fans and observers began to look beyond the surface, trying to understand not just whether the appearance had been cancelled, but why the situation had become unclear in the first place. In the world of television, especially with a program as established as El Hormiguero, changes rarely happen without reason. This understanding only deepened the intrigue. One of the most discussed elements was the sudden change in communication. Normally, appearances on major shows follow a predictable pattern. Announcements, teasers, and confirmations leading up to the broadcast. In this case, that pattern seemed interrupted. The absence of expected signals created the impression that something had shifted behind the scenes. Whether it was a delay, a reorganization, or a strategic pause, the lack of visible progress suggested that decisions were still being negotiated. Attention also turned toward Can Yaman's broader professional context. At this stage of his career, each appearance is carefully aligned with long-term goals. Television exposure is no longer just about visibility, but about positioning. An appearance on El Hormiguero would place him in front of a wide audience, at a specific moment, with a specific message. If that timing no longer matched his current strategy, reconsideration would be logical. This perspective made the situation feel less like a problem and more like a calculated adjustment. Meanwhile, the show itself became part of the discussion. El Hormiguero is known for its precision and planning, which made the silence even more noticeable. Fans familiar with the program pointed out that last-minute changes are uncommon unless something significant intervenes. This observation reinforced the idea that the uncertainty was not accidental. Something had clearly altered the original plan, even if the final outcome had not yet been decided. As days passed without clarification, the narrative evolved. Instead of asking has it been cancelled, many began asking is it being postponed? This shift in language reflected a more nuanced understanding of how television schedules operate. Postponements can occur for many reasons: logistics, timing, or mutual agreement. In such cases, silence is often a sign of ongoing coordination rather than cancellation. Can Yaman's own behavior during this period added another layer to the story. There were no hints of disappointment or frustration, but also no confirmation. His calm presence suggested that whatever was happening was being handled internally, without urgency or conflict. This further supported the idea that the situation was still open, not closed. The phrase "what's really going on" remained central because it captured the mood perfectly. The situation was not dramatic enough to signal trouble, yet unusual enough to raise eyebrows. It occupied a gray area that naturally drew attention. Fans continued to monitor updates closely, aware that even a small confirmation could shift the entire narrative. At this stage, the uncertainty itself became the story. The possibility that Can Yaman's appearance might be off, or simply delayed, kept the discussion alive. And while no definitive answer had emerged, one thing was clear: the outcome, whatever it may be, would be intentional. This was not a forgotten booking or a random cancellation. It was a moment of decision still unfolding, watched closely by everyone waiting for clarity. As the discussion surrounding Can Yaman and El Hormiguero continued to grow, a new layer of attention emerged: the role of timing and perception. In television, timing is everything. An appearance can be powerful or forgettable depending on when it happens. This realization led many to consider that the uncertainty was not a setback, but a pause designed to protect impact. If Can Yaman's appearance was meant to carry a specific message or align with a particular phase of his career, then even a small shift in timing could justify a temporary halt. Industry observers began to point out that moments like these often involve negotiations that are never made public. Scheduling conflicts are rarely just about dates, they are about narrative control. What will be discussed? How will the appearance be framed? What context will surround it? For someone like Can Yaman, whose public image is carefully managed, these questions matter. The silence, therefore, started to look less like uncertainty and more like deliberation. Another factor that gained attention was audience expectation. The anticipation around Can Yaman's appearance had already built momentum. Canceling outright would risk disappointment, while proceeding without alignment could dilute the message. This delicate balance suggested that both sides, Can Yaman's team and the show's producers, were likely weighing the long-term effect rather than the immediate reaction. In this light, the phrase "suddenly off" felt less dramatic and more strategic. Fans also began to reflect on similar situations from the past, where appearances were questioned, delayed, or restructured before finally taking place. These examples reinforced the idea that uncertainty does not equal cancellation. Often, it is part of the process. The absence of denial became as meaningful as the absence of confirmation. If the appearance had truly been cancelled, many believed a clearer signal would have emerged by now. Meanwhile, Can Yaman's broader trajectory continued to evolve. New projects, international interest, and shifting priorities all formed the backdrop against which this situation unfolded. An appearance on El Hormiguero would not exist in isolation, it would connect to everything else he was doing. This interconnectedness made the decision even more sensitive. A misaligned appearance could overshadow other developments, while a well-timed one could amplify them. The conversation online reflected this growing understanding. The tone shifted from impatience to curiosity. Instead of demanding answers, fans began asking smarter questions. What would Can Yaman want to say at this moment? What would the show want to highlight? And most importantly, when would the moment feel right for both sides? These questions suggested that the audience was prepared to wait, trusting that the delay, if it existed, served a purpose. As this phase unfolded, the story became less about cancellation and more about intention. The uncertainty surrounding Can Yaman's appearance on El Hormiguero started to feel like a crossroads rather than an ending. Whatever decision would eventually be made, it would reflect a choice, not an accident. By now, one thing was evident: the situation was still alive. Discussions were ongoing, expectations were being managed, and the silence remained controlled. The appearance had not disappeared. It had entered a state of suspension. And in the world of entertainment, suspension often signals preparation for something more precise. As attention remained focused on what would come next, the sense grew stronger that the real development had yet to reveal itself. As the situation surrounding Can Yaman's possible appearance on El Hormiguero remained unresolved, the focus gradually shifted toward what the silence itself was revealing. In an industry driven by constant updates, silence is rarely accidental. It often signals that decisions are still being shaped, and that timing matters just as much as content. For Can Yaman, this period of uncertainty began to look increasingly intentional, as if the pause was serving a purpose rather than reflecting confusion. Observers started to note that neither side appeared rushed. There was no visible attempt to control the narrative through leaks or indirect confirmations. This absence of urgency suggested that the appearance was not being abandoned, but carefully reconsidered. When major television appearances are delayed, it is often because the context has changed. Something in the broader picture may have shifted, making the original timing less effective. In this case, the question was not simply whether Can Yaman would appear, but when and under what circumstances. The audience response during this phase became more thoughtful. Fans began to understand that El Hormiguero is not just another talk show, but a platform where timing, tone, and message must align perfectly. A rushed appearance could risk misinterpretation, while a well-timed one could strengthen his position. This understanding softened the initial anxiety and replaced it with cautious expectation. Another element that gained attention was the evolving nature of Can Yaman's public image. As his career continues to expand beyond borders, every appearance contributes to how he is perceived internationally. This made the situation even more sensitive. An interview is not only about promotion, it is about narrative. If the narrative is not ready, postponement becomes the wiser choice. This perspective made the silence feel strategic rather than problematic. Industry insiders also pointed out that last-minute changes in television often reflect behind-the-scenes negotiations. Topics, format adjustments, or even the direction of the conversation can influence whether an appearance proceeds as planned. In such cases, public confirmation is usually delayed until everything is finalized. The lack of definitive statements suggested that discussions were ongoing, not concluded. As days passed, the phrase "what's really going on" continued to resonate, but its meaning evolved. It was no longer an expression of doubt, but one of curiosity about process. Fans were not just waiting to see if the appearance would happen, they were interested in how the decision would be made. This shift in attention reflected a deeper engagement with Can Yaman's journey rather than a fixation on a single event. The uncertainty also highlighted an important dynamic between visibility and control. By not addressing the situation directly, Can Yaman maintained control over his narrative. He did not allow speculation to dictate his next move. Instead, he let the process unfold at its own pace. This approach reinforced the perception that whatever decision emerged would be deliberate and aligned with his long-term vision. At this stage, it became increasingly clear that the situation had moved beyond the question of cancellation. The appearance on El Hormiguero had become a symbol of a larger moment of choice. Whether it would happen soon, later, or under different circumstances, it was being shaped with care. And as attention remained fixed on what would come next, the sense grew that clarity was approaching, not through noise, but through timing. As the situation reaches its final stage, the uncertainty surrounding Can Yaman's appearance on El Hormiguero begins to make sense in a broader context. What initially appeared as a possible cancellation now looks far more like a carefully managed pause, one shaped by timing, intention, and long-term strategy rather than confusion or conflict. The silence that once raised questions has gradually revealed its purpose. By this point, it has become clear that nothing about this situation was accidental. In television, especially at this level, appearances are not decided lightly, and neither are delays. For Can Yaman, whose career has entered a phase of international visibility and calculated moves, every public step carries weight. An appearance on El Hormiguero would not simply be another interview. It would be a moment that frames how audiences perceive his current chapter. That alone explains why rushing forward was never an option. As fans followed the developments closely, many began to recognize a familiar pattern. When an appearance is truly cancelled, signals tend to be direct and unmistakable. In this case, however, there was no closure, only suspension. This suggested that conversations were ongoing, details were being refined, and alignment was still being sought. The absence of denial became as telling as the absence of confirmation. What stands out most in this final phase is the control Can Yaman maintained throughout the process. Rather than reacting to speculation or pressure, he allowed the situation to unfold quietly. This restraint shifted the narrative from uncertainty to respect. The audience began to see the delay not as a setback, but as a sign that the moment had to be right to matter. In an industry often driven by speed, choosing precision over immediacy is a powerful statement. From a strategic perspective, the timing of an appearance can influence its entire impact. A well-placed interview can amplify momentum, while a poorly timed one can dilute it. By stepping back, Can Yaman ensured that if and when the appearance happens, it will align with the message he wants to convey, not just to promote something, but to define where he stands. This understanding transformed the question from "is it cancelled?" to "when will it be right?" As clarity slowly replaced speculation, one conclusion became evident: whatever decision emerges will be intentional. Whether the appearance moves forward, is postponed further, or takes a different form, it will reflect a choice made with purpose. The silence did not signal absence, it signaled preparation. In the end, the story of Can Yaman and El Hormiguero was never truly about cancellation. It was about control, timing, and narrative ownership. The pause allowed expectations to reset and understanding to deepen. And as the final questions settle, one thing remains certain: this moment did not weaken his position. It strengthened it. The developments surrounding the appearance have shown that sometimes the most meaningful updates come not from announcements, but from patience. As fans wait for the next step, they do so with a clearer perspective. Whatever happens next will happen at the right moment. And when it does, it will feel deliberate, measured, and fully aligned with the direction Can Yaman has chosen to take.